All right, so welcome back to History and Coffee. I wanted to do the part two to my history of the Colts revolvers video here. Take a break from the crazy crystal talk for a minute. And so I got the 1851 Navy out here, and you know, so what started this freaking madness was I was looking at these were adopted by the British military, of course the United States military, and then like the French and the Russians and the Ottomans, a whole bunch of people. And I was looking at the military like ordnance testing reports, the ones in English that I can fucking understand. And this is a 36 caliber pistol. And the British and American reports stated that this was deadly at 100 yards and effective, reasonably effective at 200. And I was like, wow, shit. Because if you look at the ballistic numbers for these, like if you look up like Lyman charts and things like that, and the numbers that people have gotten running these over chronographs, it does not sound like something that would be effective at 100 yards or 200 yards. It sounds like something that wouldn't even be effective at 25 yards. The muzzle energy and velocity out of these is very low. We're talking a 36 caliber. The standard is sort of between 8 and 900 feet per second, and it's firing an 80 grain round ball. So you're talking, that's sub 100 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. To put that in perspective, a 9mm is going like 1,000, and it's 147 grain projectile. So you're talking about anywhere from 2 to 250 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. So this is like half the numbers of the 9mm. And I was like, that doesn't really fucking jive. Like, I don't understand how they're getting this and we're getting this. And so I kind of went down a little rabbit hole. Let me put this down for a minute. I went through a little rabbit hole concerning historical loading of these pistols. The first thing that we get wrong is there was two ways of loading these in the time when they were out. Like, so in the 19th century, you would load them with loose powder and ball, or you would load them with a paper cartridge, and this is one I made myself. This isn't historically accurate. I just sort of roll these like cigarettes, and there's guys that sell kits that you can actually make historically accurate paper cartridges with conicals and things like that, but these are awesome. Anyway, so they'd be loaded with paper cartridges or loose powder and ball. And the standard grain measure, the standard measure of powder for this 36 caliber is anywhere between 17 and 21 grains. And that's not what Colt recommended from the factory. In fact, Colt from the factory, in the instructions that came with your 1851 Navy, if you bought it in 1851, would say to fill this chamber, the chambers in the cylinder completely to the top with powder, and then compress a round ball on top of it. So you're not talking about no 17, 21 grains, you're talking about 30 in this pistol. And then things started to make sense a little bit more. So then I started digging into the paper cartridges. We have surviving records from the Confederate Army, the Union Army, Hazard's Powder Company. These are the guys that made paper cartridges during the Civil War for these Navy pistols. And again, looking at the grains, the Union standard for a paper cartridge was 15 grains of powder. The Confederate standard was 17. And I was like, okay, so that must be where we're getting this, 15, 17 crap from that we use now when we load with loose powder and ball. And so I looked into it a bit more, and folks who have gotten their hands on original paper cartridges that survive today opened them up. Now, the manuals the ordnance manuals concerning these paper cartridges stated that that 17 and 15 grain measure was a 3F powder. And that's, what these are designed to load for. But when they opened them up and looked at them, the granules were smaller and more uniform than the powder we have today. And that means two things. One, it was more like 4F than 3F. And that is a big difference. 4F is normally used as a priming powder in a flintlock. If you dumped 17 grains of priming powder into this and fired a bullet out of it, you're talking about probably 100 to 150% more muzzle energy. So now these numbers are starting to make sense. Also, because the grains are more uniform, the powder actually fouls less. So you're not talking about when you fire these with, say, shit like Go-Ax, which is what we have, the real black powder we have all over the United States. Go-Ax just spews shit all over this. And that's when you get into these guys who are like greasing chamber mouths and using wads and stuff like that. Back in the day, yes, these would foul. Yes, they would lead, but not like they do today. And I thought that was fascinating. So we kind of lost, black powder is sort of a secondary thing for hobbyists now. Back when that was the primary powder that they used, it's, especially to, bet your life on, they made the powder a lot differently, a lot better. So basically, from my research, the closest thing that you can find on the market that would be like exact or as close as you can get to like the Civil War powders they were using in cartridges would be like that Swiss caviar shit. And you can use 3 or 4F. You're not going to blow this shit up with 4F. That's another misconception. People like, I put 4F in my revolver, and all the boomers in the forums, you're going to blow it up. You're going to turn it into a hand. These things were shooting 4F 150 fucking years ago, when metallurgy was not anywhere near what it is today and not blowing up. In fact, a lot of the examples of these pistols, like from the antebellum period that are around still, are in firing condition. So just throw that bullshit out of the window. So yeah, you can fill this goddamn thing with 30 grains of 3F powder, and you can put 17 grains in there of 4F, and you're going to be fine. And that's going to be a historical charge. And I don't have the ability to run this over a chronograph, but I imagine if I did, the numbers would look a lot different. And those ordnance reports about them being lethal at 100 yards and effective at 200 would make a lot more sense. So that's your historical powder shit. Now, the other thing, greasing chamber mouths and wads and all this shit. I want to say right off the bat that there is no evidence of anybody greasing the chamber mouths at the time when these pistols were issued, or when they were, that seems to be an invention of like the 20s and the 30s when these are starting to become a hobby thing. And I understand the logic there. So there's two parts to that. One, it's, helps soften the fouling in the barrel. Okay, I understand that. But the other thing is that it prevents chain fires or prevents moisture from getting into your powder. And that's absolute bullshit. When you load these pistols, they're designed to shave a ring off of the projectile and create a seal in the chamber. A flash is not getting around that lead projectile, provided you have it fitted correctly. And you'll know, because when you load it, you'll see a little lead ring fall out. So chain fires happen from the back, and they happen from ill-fitting caps. So greasing the chamber mouths does not prevent chain fires. As far as it keeping the fouling soft, I don't believe that it does that either. Honestly, I don't see how, in what universe, after the first shot, all 6 chambers don't spew their shit out all over the front of your revolver and make it, damn near impossible to clean. If you're worried about keeping fouling soft, I would suggest using lubricated felt wads. Again, that wasn't used back then, and they're not necessary. They're not necessary for the function of the firearm, but they will help. They'll help you get more shots through the barrel before it starts to foul up and you get weird pressure curves and things like that. So as far as those things keeping moisture out, one of the ways that Sam Colt demonstrated this revolver to distributors and militaries and things like that is he would load it with powder and ball, cap it, submerge it in water completely, give his sales pitch you know. So you're talking anywhere from 20 minutes to a half hour. Pull it out of the water and then fire all 6 chambers. So the system is designed to keep moisture out, you know, provided it's capped, provided there's a good fitting ball, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, you know, I heard my great granddaddy say that he put candle wax in the chambers to keep the water out, and that way you know, no. Yeah, don't grease the chamber. Please don't grease the chamber mouths. That's all I'm going to say. It's a stupid. I don't. It almost seems like a superstition to me. If you get a chain fire, make sure that your balls are the right size. Make sure that your caps are fitting properly. And that leads me to the final issue as far as historical cap jams. So there's you know, so there's Colt revolvers, Remington revolvers, you know, like Star and a couple of other ones floating around from the same period that were all percussion. And for some reason, these Colt revolvers, the reproductions, they like to have cap jams. And a cap jam, of course, is when your hammer falls, fires your cap. 2 things will happen. Either the pressure will blow the cap back out through the touch hole in the nipple, or it will hang up on your hammer, and that will deposit it down in here into the lockwork, basically, and lock your revolver up. So that's no fun. And I dug into that. There are ways to prevent that with these reproductions, and there's a million videos about that. I'm just talking about, like, in historical context. I dug into that, and the dimensions of percussion caps were different, of course, in the 19th century. The ones that we have now are fatter than the ones that they had back then. They were actually thinner. Actually, no, it's the opposite. The ones they had back then are fatter. The ones we have now are thinner. And so if you're using a gun that was designed for those 19th century caps, you're using, you know, modern caps, the system doesn't like it so much. So you have to do things to ameliorate that. You know, people fill in the safety notch. Like, I have slick shot nipples on this one. That's another way to get rid of that. But that's sort of where the cap jam issue comes from in these reproductions. So I hope, you know, I don't want to hear shit about, oh, you're going to blow up your revolver with 4F powder, because nobody has. I mean, I wouldn't suggest putting 30 grains of it in here, but 15 to 17 grains of 4F powder in this thing's going to be fine. And 30 grains of, you know, basically doing what Colonel Colt says, filling the chamber up, compressing a ball down on it, and firing it is not going to blow this up. It didn't blow it up 100 years ago with, you know, steel that had been tempered by some guy eyeballing it in a forge. It's not going to blow up now with modern steel. So hopefully that clears up some of these things about these revolvers. And again, if you own these, I suggest, like, there's a million videos how to make these little paper cartridges. They make them a lot faster to load, and they, you know, they add to the fun. And it's relaxing making them too. It's like tying a fly. So I definitely suggest looking this up. And stay tuned for part 3 of the history of Colts revolvers when we talk about cartridge guns. Because, yeah, I got some single action armies and shit too. So thanks.